And let's bring in now former Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker for more on what this search may look like today. Good to see you, Matthew, as always. Thanks for being with us.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
So, we're learning more about his mental history, and a friend, also a neighbor, said Robert Card is a deer hunter capable of hiding for a long time if he doesn't want to be caught. Tell us what you think some of the challenges are, because clearly this is a wide area. There's also a lot of deep woods.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is that there's no doubt that this individual planned his escape. And, it's pretty clear based on, finding this car at a boat launch. I read something today that suggested there were at least 4 outcomes that were possible based on, sort of where the car was recovered. And so, it is obviously important for law enforcement not only to, neutralize him as a threat, but also to maintain their own safety and discipline, because as you can imagine, they don't want to miss him somehow or have him double back behind him. If you remember a couple of weeks ago, we had the individual who was an escapee from jail, and how he was able to evade law enforcement for a period of time. And so I think,
that's right.
Yeah, and I think the important thing on all of this is to make sure that the lessons from that case are learned. And so, if there were mistakes or if there were additional ways that this individual could be tracked, that they learn those lessons. And I think that's in all of these situations where law enforcement's pretty good about learning the lessons and then training their colleagues across the country in what they learned in each case.
We talked yesterday, they were going to look for some of his, records with his phone. They can obviously use phones to see if they pick up a signal or a credit card and whatnot. I'm sure they're working all those leads. But is there also a possibility he may be somewhere and may have committed suicide? There was one report that a note may have been found.
Yeah, and that is obviously typically some of these cases end in that way, whether it's a suicide or a suicide by cop. But ultimately, they're doing the investigation, which includes sort of trying to figure out whether he left any cookie crumbs to suggest where he was going to go after he committed this, awful attack at these locations. But, the law enforcement component of this is multifaceted, and obviously they have the assets they need. The feds in the state has come in with tremendous resources, including aerial resources, and those are really important in trying to find individuals like this.
Absolutely, and could be the turning point today. We don't know. Any moment we could get a break in this where they say they've either found him or have him barricaded. Obviously, we're watching it closely. But I do want to get your reaction to some of the comments. This obviously gives the left and the Democrats to bring up gun control issues again. And while this is a horrific and tragic story, we also know this man reportedly had been committed over the summer for hearing voices in his head, had threatened to shoot up a military base. So instead of looking at the mental health and what was missed, we did hear some bring in gun control. And I just want to get your reaction. This happens over and over where we hear them not addressing. I mean, there's also a report where he may have been released because he didn't have enough care in his insurance to continue his care, Matthew. So when you hear people bring up gun control and coming after our Second Amendment after a shooting, just give us your thoughts on why that is so dangerous to our Constitution.
Yeah, and I think it's also very dangerous to every time we have an incident like this where we have, significant tragedy and everyone's heart is broken because of the senseless killing by our fellow citizens. I think we need to remember that, we need to approach this issue with a sober and clear-eyed approach. And, again, the left reacts emotionally to these. And, the Second Amendment, our founding fathers put it in the Constitution for a very important reason. And, we need to make sure that those rights are always protected. And, to your point, we have laws on the books right now, federal bans of mentally incompetent people from possessing firearms. We have, this yellow flag law and other red flag laws in other states that should have worked in this case. This individual should have never had a firearm in the first place. And so, there are several failures that instead of, passing more laws as a prophylactic to try to prevent these situations, is just enforcing the laws on the books and making sure that prohibited people don't have firearms in the first place.
That's right. Not getting them to slip through the cracks time and time again. That's what we continue to see. Matthew Whitaker, I appreciate your time today. Really good insight on where this manhunt may lead in the next few hours.
All right. Thank you. Good seeing you again.